The Pyrrhic Wars were now fully underway. We talked last episode on why they started and why Pyrrhus got involved in the conflict. This week we'll go over why the war was flipped on its head and went from a southern Italian conflict to a Sicilian conflict. The Battle of Heraclea was fought and won by Pyrrhus, but it was a hard win. A Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhus lost many of his best men, friends and generals in this struggle against Rome, but still a win is a win. The Roman envoys were coming to meet him, and Pyrrhus hoped for a truce, but Rome had only come for a return of their captives. Pyrrhus was disappointed. He pushed for peace and an alliance, and so offered to return the captives free of charge if Rome accepted. This is interesting, and why diplomacy is so important, but I'll avoid the love letter to the subject for now. Either Pyrrhus knew Rome will not accept and was merely playing for time, or he genuinely wanted peace and was inclined to go for Sicily instead, coming back for Rome later. The Epirot king had already taken administrative control in Tarentum, taking active measures to prevent revolts, such as taking the pro-Roman Tarentines over to Epirus, where some would later be assassinated. Pyrrhus was ruling in the eyes of the democratic Greeks as a tyrant. Pyrrhus released the Roman prisoners and asked the envoys to go back to Rome to consider his offer. The envoys, with no power to discuss such terms themselves, headed back to Rome with Pyrrhus's diplomat, Cinnes. However, there is an account that says they did negotiate peace terms, and it was then sent to Rome to be ratified. Cinnes then made an interesting move. He offered that Epirus would help Rome subjugate southern Italy in exchange for a truce, but Tarentum would remain independent. But for Pyrrhus, and everything we know of him, to be happy with this deal does not make any sense. I know Rome ultimately wins, but Pyrrhus should ask for more here. He should play more on his victory. Italians were rising up against Rome to join Pyrrhus. The south was out of Rome's control. He wanted peace, it seems from the sources, to then invade Sicily, but at least ask for more and then negotiate down to just the liberation of Tarentum if that's all you want. Anyway, just a bad example of diplomacy from Pyrrhus there. And then Rome, being as stubborn as they were, declined. The argument being they could not trust Pyrrhus. Either way, a weird series of events, but that is as the sources tell it. What followed was another win by Pyrrhus at Asculum, but still another Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhus was struggling for manpower and losing too much strength every battle. Rome, on the other hand, could replenish with unrivalled speed. It was around this point that Carthage was getting worried. This liberator of Greeks could come over to Sicily and become a nuisance for them. One of their commanders, Magor, went to Rome to seek an alliance. This was declined at first, but would later come into fruition. The first series on my channel dealt with the diplomatic history between Rome and Carthage, which you may want to check out after to see how those two eventually joined sides. Anyway, Magor then went to Pyrrhus to negotiate with him, although it quickly became clear that Sicily was Pyrrhus's intention. Pyrrhus was then sent two requests at the same time, one from the Greeks of Sicily who had long fought against the Carthaginians, wishing him to come to their aid and rid them of Carthaginian tyranny. In return, they offered full command of themselves and their cities to Pyrrhus. The other was from Macedon. The Macedonian king, who had sent Pyrrhus 5,000 troops in his quest, had died in battle, and the nobles of Macedon requested Pyrrhus to ascend to the throne. It feels like an option chain that you would get in a video game or something. What's the chance they come at the same time? Such a difficult call this would have been. It was not a matter of picking which he wanted, but rather a matter of picking which ambition to drop. Pyrrhus chose to help the Greeks of Sicily. Pyrrhus believed Sicily and Africa would be more glorious and prosperous, and so sent his armies there. His son, Alexander, was also a potential claimant to the throne of Syracuse. Pyrrhus possibly intended to conquer Sicily, put it under the rule of Greek Syracuse, and then name his son as king, whilst Alexander governed Sicily and supported Pyrrhus with money and troops. The Epirot king could then invade the rich African coast. Africa had already been successfully invaded by the Sicilian king Agathocles only 30 years prior. This Greek, leading just Syracuse, had managed to conquer most of modern-day Tunisia, even besieging Carthage itself, but had not the manpower to see this final ambition through. To Pyrrhus, hearing these histories, Carthage would appear easy to conquer and full of riches. On the other hand, he knew Macedon would be a difficult kingdom to tame. Politics there was turbulent, with kings often being murdered young into their reigns. It was unstable. In addition, the last king had been killed by an invasion from the Galatians, who were a unique, feared force that terrified many in Macedon. Pyrrhus certainly wanted the throne of Macedon, but it seems he believed that now was not the time. The Tarentines, whilst Pyrrhus pondered his thoughts in their city, were growing disgruntled. Either continue the war or leave things as they were, they said. Greeks. Although Pyrrhus did not leave the Greeks alone to fend off Rome, a garrison was left behind, and Sinis once again went to Rome to make an offer, but was again turned down. The stubbornness of Romans and the stubbornness of the Greeks must have driven him insane, although Appian does report that there was an armistice. Pyrrhus had incredible success at first against Carthage, more so than Rome did in the First Punic War. There was one city that stood in the way of the campaign's completion, Lilybaeum. Lilybaeum was a heavily walled city and would take a real siege to bring down. To do this, Pyrrhus needed more money, and so taxed the Greeks of Sicily, but this went down terribly with them, and so they accused him of tyranny. Anger had been building up for a while. Pyrrhus left his military generals in charge of the cities, made some administrative decisions, and had some prominent Greeks executed under false charges. They demanded that he left, and stated he was no longer welcome in Sicily, and so Pyrrhus left, and with that, Greek freedom would die. Greeks. Pyrrhus had also been called back by the Tarentines and Samnites, who were struggling against Rome. If not, then he may have perhaps imposed more brutal measures in Sicily to quell the population, allowing him to stay and complete his siege of Lilybaeum. And so ends this week's diplomacy video. Join me next time, where I will go over the final peace talks, ending the Pyrrhic War. I hope you enjoyed and learnt something. Leave a like if you did, subscribe for more, share with anyone you think may be interested, it really helps me out. But for now, until the next one, this has been the history of diplomacy.